I'm just a southern god, no spot left to be had. Drifting on the current and the rain and the river bed.
Today on the Changeville podcast, we're talking to Amy Ray. Amy has been a force in contemporary folk music for over 3 decades as a member of the platinum-selling, Grammy Award-winning Indigo Girls. Since 2001, she's released 5 studio albums as a solo artist, including her most recent 2014's Goodnight Tender. You'll get to hear her personal and powerful songwriting at Changeville in 2017, so get your tickets now. She runs a label called Daemon Records, helped found a nonprofit organization called Honor the Earth, and on top of all of this, is very active as an activist involved in a wide range of social issues. We're honored to have Amy Ray on the show today. How are you doing today, Amy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Can't complain. It's pretty warm here in Florida, even though it's like mid-December. I'm in a t-shirt.
Yeah. Well, it's been that way in Georgia for a while, but then it just got cold, so now it feels a little bit more like winter.
So, Amy, in researching your activism, I was amazed by the amount of work you've done and the range of issues, from gay rights to indigenous struggles, gun control, women's rights, environmental protection, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Before digging into any of these individual issues further, I just have to ask, how do you balance your time and energy between your personal life, your art, and your activism? All of these things demand a great deal of time and energy.
One thing is it's all kind of like a tapestry for us, and Emily and I, as the Indigo Girls, like as far as our activism, it's pretty much woven into how we work and the shows that we play and benefits that we do and the resources we have and, our website and just, kind of everything we do takes into consideration kind of the activist lens, like seeing things through that lens. And it's not like I'm spending every single day on every single issue. It's more like we have a few basic things that we're always kind of paying attention to, one of them being our organization, Honor the Earth, which is like an ongoing organization since the early 90s. And that one, we go to board meetings and we have phone calls all the time and are really like constantly in that sort of room. And that's a Native American environmental and cultural sustainability. And then we might, and with like queer activism, obviously it's ever present in our life because of who we are and being queer people and everything. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of part of how we operate and what we pay attention to and what we might speak out about. And other issues we sort of revolve in and out as we do benefits, or we know that there's certain things going on that we want to pay attention to, or we might say, for this whole tour, we're going to collect canned goods and talk about hunger in different communities when that's like at a critical point or something. Or we might, after Hurricane Katrina, we went down there and did some activism around that and bringing the musicians back home again and giving them resources and stuff. So it kind of just depends on what's going on, but they're all tied together by this idea, of like the sacredness of life, basically, and that you put life before profit and you really try to focus on that. And we're changing the paradigm. We try to be very careful about, who we support and kind of making sure the money is used in the right way that we appreciate as far as real grassroots, community-based activism. And that informs a lot of our choices and how we balance our time. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it's kind of like it's just like built up over time, and we're older now, and so we've collected all these resources and mentors and ways of looking at the world, and it all ties into everything we do. And then we also just play shows that are just regular shows, and I do the same thing solo. I just, certainly play benefits, but I also do just a lot of like, touring around and playing songs and being a songwriter and kind of having that artistic life. It's all informed in our actions, I think, by what we believe and the people that have taught us so many great things.
I love the quote, life before profit. What is the most important thing? What are our priorities in life, and how do we make them align? And it sounds like you've done a really great job of making that happen for yourself in your life. Well,
I think there is much to be improved in my own life, still, and I always think of myself as kind of a constant student in that area. But I do know that that's my goal. It's not always achievable. I mean, we, as touring musicians, we're burning up the environment as we go around in our tour buses. We used biodiesel for a long time and then kind of looked at that equation and a lot of people in the farming industry felt like food was being used for fuel, and we needed to figure out a better way to do that. There's a lot, there's this constant adjustment that you make, and I know that especially people that live in Florida that are environmentalists really know about that, because there's like a constant adjustment. Well, people planted all the Australian pines, and then they realized they were messing up all the mangroves and messing up the natural environment, so they cut down all the Australian pines. But then the ospreys didn't have as many places to nest, and then it's just like this ongoing thing. And then with canals that were built and the wetlands, and it's like I think like I look at the ecosystem of humanity the same way, like and the ecosystem in your household too. You get lazy for a while and you don't do the things the way you should do them to really pay attention to the environment, and then you kind of go back and you readjust that and you do a better job of it. It's not something that's supposed to make you feel constantly ashamed and guilty, of your own privilege. It's just something that, like, be mindful that every little thing you do has an effect, and you can constantly adjust that, but don't let it weigh you down, make you depressed all the time. But it's you don't want to be like the sad sack, that's walking around and checking everybody's actions all the time.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. So we both kind of talked a little bit around Honor the Earth, and this is the nonprofit that you helped found in 1993. For our listeners, can you describe what the mission and work of that nonprofit is?
Sure. Well, it was founded with a woman named Winona LaDuke, who is a native activist from the White Earth Land Reservation in northern Minnesota, and she's Ojibwe, and she's a great leader, and she, in fact, had run for vice president in the Green Party a couple of times, and has done amazing things in her reservation, but also all over the country. So we heard her speaking at an Earth Day event that we were doing up in Boston, and we were like, we had been working at the time with Greenpeace and, just kind of basic, really simple stuff with Greenpeace, not anything majorly radical, but we're kind of dipping our toes into that. But we heard Winona speak, and it was all about, native environmentalism and seeing things kind of through that lens, trying to preserve things for the seventh generation to come, and kind of the grassroots way of doing work, and all of the resources and land and way of life that was constantly under the gun, for lack of a better term, by corporations. And so we thought, there's a lot of these amazing like tribes that are fighting like nuclear waste dumping or pollution from a paper mill or hydroelectric dams that are ruining the salmon run. Or they have a traditional house down the traditional Seminoles in southern Florida that want to live in their traditional style of housing, but they can't because it's against regulations. Like things that we saw that tribes were working on that would shift, really truly make change if they could win their battles. And we decided with Winona to form this group called Honor the Earth, and it was founded by the Indigenous Women's Network, the Seventh Generation Fund, and the Indigenous Environmental Network. And those groups provided the original board members and sort of the infrastructure. And then we grew from there and just became our own entity. And Emily and I are not Native, but we felt like this was an effective way to work. So what we would do is we would raise money in the non-Native communities as well as Native communities and grant it to groups that were already in existence that were doing this work. So there might be a group in Utah fighting nuclear waste dumps, the Skull Valley Goshoots, and they would say, we need $10,000 for this battle, for infrastructure. And they would write us a letter, and we would do it in our granting cycle. We would fund them, or we would fund a youth project on sobriety, or a recycling program, or a group fighting a hydroelectric dam in the Northwest, or we would fund a simple solar project in a Hopi village, or wind power on the Rosebud Reservation in the Dakotas. And at the same time we were doing that, we were also going and doing different tours where we would play shows on reservations sort of in conjunction with local tribes, artists from the local tribes that would also play. And then we would also take that show to a border town and play there too. And we would try to build a bridge between the non-Indian and Indian communities, because we found that Indian issues are often buried way deep down, and just people just don't know what's going on. And there's a lot of racism. And so we were trying to sort of build that bridge as well. And then the third part of it was that we would go to do advocacy work, within the government, like lobby in Washington and all that kind of stuff, and legal work. For instance, the Standing Rock issue. Part of the thing that Honor the Earth has done for Standing Rock is to provide funding for legal infrastructure for people that are arrested to get them out of jail and to help them in court. So there's all these different things that we can fund as an organization that we find to be supportive of groups that are already doing the work. So we're kind of like amplifiers and little infrastructural helpers. We've been going since 1993, and Winona LaDuke is still our executive director, although we're training some younger folks to come up through the ranks to do that job as well. So we really focus on youth leadership and try to like mentor the younger people onto our board and things like that. So this group kind of is a model for us for all the other kinds of activism we do. So we sort of base, like, if we're going to work on an issue around gun violence, we would say, you know what, we should work with a community-based group that's in a community that's in crisis, that needs funding, that needs somehow to figure out an alternative to gun violence and a way of teaching people and a way of giving youth an alternative to violent situations. And so we might fund something that's more grassroots, or we might fund a group in Atlanta, Southerners on New Ground, Song, who's a southeastern-based group that does queer issues, but also works on immigration issues and sort of knows that cross-pollination, because particularly to the South, within the queer community, we need to build bridges with people working on immigration issues and issues around class and race, because we have to be strong and we have to work with each other to do that. And so that's how we look at everything now through the scope of the work that Honor the Earth has done and what we've learned from the tribes that we've worked with, because they really know how to work. They really know how to do activism. And so we've learned from them, and that branched out into all the other kind of work we do.
I definitely have to add that, yeah, from everything that I have seen with, as you mentioned, Standing Rock and the Dakota Access Pipeline and all of that, that is one thing that I have seen. They know how to be amazing activists, and these pictures that are circulating over the internet that everyone is seeing and talking about issues that even 6 months ago, a year ago, I don't think very many people were even aware that these things were happening. And hearing the work that you do with Honor the Earth is, especially right now, so relevant.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, Standing Rock is a very special moment in time, and, and hopefully with the change in administration, that battle can be won still. I think it can be. I mean, those activists out there are just incredible and steadfast and brave. But the thing about Indian issues is so interesting to me that it's kind of like, I mean, Obama's been pretty good, and but most of the time you are working on the same issues regardless of who is in the administration, which is telling, because it's just like this huge stumbling block in the United States with treaty rights and broken treaties and a history of genocide that we cannot get past enough to get out of our denial and really do something about it. And that's what the Democrats too. It's amazing, because I really love Hillary Clinton, but I did not, when you compare how often she ever mentioned Native Americans as one of the listings of the disenfranchised people, when the candidates would say, African American, Hispanic, Asian, and Bernie Sanders is the only person that said Native American. I mean, it's quite amazing to me. And it's so that's in the left wing, even people like Hillary, who are so smart and so progressive and so just brilliant, it's not the first thing that comes to their mind. I mean, it's amazing that Obama has done as much as he has, and he has done a lot. I think that it's this thing that's been with us for a long, long time, and I really believe that we cannot solve a lot of the problems that we have until we look at this one and really clear it up. And I feel that way because of the work we've done and what I've seen when something can be, when Standing Rock comes into the consciousness of America, it makes us think about everything else as well. and it shines a light on all suffering. And it shines a light on what bravery is and what courage is and what it means to fight for humanity. And so I truly believe that working on these issues helps all the other issues.
And someone broke your heart, I didn't. Someone played too hard, I didn't. Someone stole your dreams, I didn't. Someone got there a long time before me.
But I did want to switch gears since Changeville is social change, activism, and art. I wanted to switch gears to your music a bit. I was reading in Bob Boylan's book, Your Song Changed My Life, this past weekend, that you are one of Justin Vernon of Bon Iver's greatest musical influences, and I thought, oh, interesting timing. I'm about to talk to Amy. So you're someone who has truly influenced an entire generation of artists, Justin being just one example.
Well, just Justin, really.
So who are some of your musical influences?
Oh man, it's endless. But early on it was like Neil Young and Janis Joplin, people from that era, because my sister was kind of a hippie. Those are the records I was exposed to. The Allman Brothers, Southern rock, country music, and then some folk music like Carole King and James Taylor. I was really influenced later by, as I started to discover things that were kind of left of the dial, by Patti Smith and The Replacements and Husker Du and Chrissie Hynde and, all those great folks. And then Riot Grrrl came along, and punk music was very important to me before that. And The Clash and the Butchies, Team Dress Against Me. I really loved them. Florida band, a great
Gainesville
band.
natives, yeah.
Yeah. Rancid, the Distillers, like some heavy stuff like that. And then I love like Outkast, and I love Public Enemy. These are people that I look to as like songwriting sort of inspirations. Would be like, well, Justin, for sure. He's innovative. He's a visionary.
That new album is so good.
It's so good. And his lyrics are always something to really dig into, and his melodies as well. And I find him, no matter how much production and innovation he has within the realm of his and orchestration, like on his records, I can, when I see him break it down and just play it by himself as well, it's remarkable. And that's a great songwriter that can do that, and a great producer that can take that song and make it this incredible piece of art that can stand on its own that way or the other way. So the Shins, I always really loved them a lot. I thought they were a pretty amazing band. There's a writer named Heather McIntyre from North Carolina that I like a lot. Another writer from the Northwest named Lindsay Fuller. And it's endless. I could go on and on. It's like there's all these new country artists that blow me away. Angelina Presley has a new record coming out soon that is really quite amazing. To me, she's kind of like a Hemingway of country writing, where she just understands the economy of words and melody in a way that is like Hank Williams did, and like Chris Stapleton is the same to me. He's like just really understands how to write a country song. So everything from punk to country, I like music that tends to be populist and speak to people in that way. And I find punk to do that, and I find country to do that.
I look forward to you being here in Gainesville again. I know you've played here before. Because Gainesville is known to be the punk center of Florida. I love hearing this list of artists, and I know our listeners are going to, no matter what musical genre you consider yourself to be into, just hearing the list of artists that you just mentioned, there's going to be something for everyone to dig into. I know for myself, I wasn't familiar with a couple of those names, and I'm definitely now going to go check them out. Thank you for that.
Oh yeah, and there's a new well, he's not that new, but a guy named Yellow Wolf. He's like a white Southern hip hop artist that is kind of a protege of Eminem, but he's one of my new favorites of all time.
Okay, wow.
He's like, I can't even tell you, like, I just think he's absolutely brilliant, and he preaches the right gospel, and he sings this badass hip hop stuff, and it's like, I don't know. He's amazing. He's remarkable. Emily actually turned me on to him. Emily's really into hip hop, so she always lets me know what's happening in that world.
So you've been an independent artist for years. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages to that approach?
Well, I've been on a major label with Emily. We were part of Epic for a long, long, long time. We were independent first, then we were part of Epic, and then we were part of a record label called Hollywood, and then we went independent and started our own label again and got distribution through Vanguard. And I mean, you know, when we were on a major label, it was a different time, and it was kind of like we were super lucky. Like, we came at a time when it was like Rage Against the Machine and Oasis and, like, you know, all these Joan Jett and all these cool artists were on Epic, that they were really developing artists. It just felt more like being on an indie in some way, but you had this vast resource, you know, behind you. But it was a corporation, you know, and you could feel it in that other way where you kind of felt like, you know, like it makes you grit your teeth a little bit. But we were also very privileged to have that. And when it was over, I just felt like I just want to be independent, you know, and because I think the biggest thing is that you really control your spending and your marketing and how things are. It's not about, like, for me, we never were limited artistically, although many people are. We were limited by being involved in a business infrastructure that we didn't always agree with. And so now we don't have to worry about that. And it helps us be true to ourselves more and do things the way we want to do them. So that's what I would say about that. As a solo artist, I've always been independent, and I love it. And it's part of the reason why I do solo work is just to be part of that world, because I like to drive the van and pull the trailer and get the amps out and fix things myself and book the gigs and promote the gigs and you know, just kind of be really hands-on about it. And I just think there's something to be said for it. And in this climate right now, I mean, you really can do as much as an independent artist as you can on a label. And I say that just from having an indie label for so long. And I put out about 70 records by other people. And at some point I was like, you know what? Most of these bands can do as much for themselves as I'm doing for them. And if they're motivated. And so I told, you know, a lot of bands were like, can we just do our own thing? And I was like, whenever a band felt like that, I just let them go. Because I think they realized they were selling so many records at shows and they could do as well that way as they could through distribution, because record stores and, you know, sort of things were kind of falling apart in that realm. So everybody was trying to reconfigure how to be an indie artist and what that meant, you know? I mean, if it's a label like Merge or Sub Pop or something it's a big, big indie, then I think that's very, very relevant still. But for me, I'm such a small little label that bands can do a lot for themselves, you know? And so I put my own records out and, you know, look towards doing some kind of projects that are like archival and putting out records like that. But I found that that what bands really need right now is like a booking agent. You know, it's like, I mean, that's what I would, if I was going to start a new business, I would start a booking agency. Seriously.
That's not what I expected you to say.
They need that. Every band I talk to, they have no problem putting out their own music or getting things up on YouTube or knowing or understanding distribution. They have problem getting gigs. That's what they have a problem with. And because getting gigs is like really hard and takes a lot of connections and constant, like, relentless bugging of people, and it's just not something that a lot of artists like to do, you know? And so I think, like, when they look at, like, being truly independent and doing everything for themselves, the one thing that falls through the cracks is understanding how to get gigs. And, you know, for me and Emily, we came up at a time when it was just different, you know, and it was really community-based, and we constantly beg our friends to let us open for them or play during their breaks or whatever, and there wasn't all this, like, strategy with promoters of, like, putting certain bands together and blah, blah, blah. It was like we just really were relentless. I mean, I would call a club every day for 2 weeks until they gave me a gig. We'd play for free for, like, every gig we did for the first, 3 times at the room, we would play for free. And then we would have a following, and they would be like, okay, we'll start paying you now. So, we had youth on our side because we were very young. We were 20 years old, and we were in college. Didn't have a lot to do except to go to college. And we were relentless, and that's what it took. But I think it's harder now. I just think it's a lot harder. And so that's the problem area I find with the most bands that I work with are like, I just don't know how to get a tour going. And I always try to, talk about start small, play in your own town, and then play in a town that's an hour away, work in concentric circles and just keep branching out further and further and share gigs with other bands and, create your own gigs, play house shows, whatever it takes. It's the real DIY kind of punk ethic. And that is basically an area, though, where I find bands to be the most confused, I'll say.
We're running a little bit low on time. I wanted to definitely mention to all of our listeners, go listen to Amy's 2014 record, Goodnight Tender. For those of you who, we were talking about Justin Vernon there a little bit, he's on that record. It's great. I've been listening to it pretty much nonstop the last couple weeks.
Cool.
I wanted to say that one of the elements of your music that most resonates, especially with me and I know with a number of our listeners, is that you weave socially relevant themes into your lyrics. A couple of the songs that come to mind offhand are like Laramie and Who Sold the Gun. Thinking about where our country is right at this moment, I wonder what your feelings are about the responsibility of being an artist to the people in their community. Can you speak to that?
We have a responsibility no matter what we're doing. So, as it could be, you can be a CEO at a company and you have a responsibility in your community right now to reach out and to help people, because there's going to be a lot more people in need, I'll guarantee you. And there's going to be a lot of bridges that need to be built between people that don't agree with you and you. And you need to, because there's a lot of people that might have voted the way they voted for Trump, let's say, because they thought they were going to get help. And maybe they're not. And so you need to reach out and be willing to help. No matter, because I can't go with that whole thing about like not, just because someone voted for someone different, like not liking that person. I've never been that way. I grew up in the rural, and I live in the rural South, and I wouldn't be able to exist if I was that way. You have to work with people. So, but as an artist, I think you have a special privilege because you have access to a way of gathering people together for art and bringing people together and breaking down barriers. And so I think right now is an especially relevant time to be doing that. It's not a time to alienate people. It's not a time to be you should be an activist, but you don't need to politicize your activism in a way that's alienating. So maybe you are really mad because Trump won, or maybe you're really mad because you voted for Trump and everybody's being so hard on him, whatever it is. I don't know, as an artist, I think your job right now is to talk about community and talk about humanity and race and class and issues, and don't, like Emily and I, we don't endorse presidential candidates or any candidates because we want to talk about issues without all that getting in the way. And I think that's the time right now. Art needs to be that. It needs to be bringing us closer to the truth and to knowledge and to really finding out about what's going on and to using our art to support indie spaces and indie media and doing whatever we can to kind of build coalitions in that way. And maybe our art can speak to that with the art itself, or maybe our art is the tool to actually bring people into that space to talk about why that space is important. So I think that's our job as artists right now in communities. But I truly believe no matter what you do, whether you're a welder or a plumber or a mechanic or a CFO or a teacher, you have the same job because we all owe it to our communities to do something in our communities. And so, I feel that way pretty strongly. I don't think artists have this exceptional thing that we always have to be doing something and other people don't. I think it's more like everyone has to do something. But artists are usually privileged to have a space to sit in to do that, and some people aren't. So we have almost easier access to that, and that's why we need to be even more mindful about it.
Do you have any projects that you're working on right now that our listeners can keep an eye out for?
I'm writing for another country record, which might be a little more country punky.
Interesting.
Emily and I are going to record a record with a symphony in Boulder, Colorado, in April. Be released like a full-on symphony recordings of a bunch of our songs. And really exciting, Emily is working on her first solo record ever. Right now she's in the studio, and that's going to come out in the spring sometime. And then we're touring and working on things. But we have an Honor the Earth board meeting coming up we're very excited about. And we're going to be doing a whole new list of grantees and talking about, what's going on right now in the Indian country. So that's coming up for us. And we've been fine-tuning our website resource section for activists to go look at to find out about all the different groups that we really like. And that's something we've been working on intensively for the past, 6 months. And so that's kind of where we're at. We've been touring a lot this year, and so we've got some downtime in the winter, and then in the spring we'll start back up again, just touring around and doing what we do,
So I have 2 last questions for you. One is, if you could suggest one song, and this could be your song or anyone you've ever heard, one song for our listeners to go find after listening to this podcast, what would that be?
Oh, man, that's a hard one. The first thing that comes to mind for me is Sam Cooke's Change Gonna Come. Change is Gonna Come by Sam Cooke. That's just what came to my head.
I mean,
because right now, that's what it feels like.
I feel you.
Right.
That is right in line with everything that Changeville is all about.
Yeah, and there's also a really great version that Mia Zapata did from the Gits. She did a really cool version of Change is Gonna Come too. So for the punkers, you can look up the Gits version, and for the people that want the classic soul version, you can look up Sam Cooke's.
My last question is, if anyone listening wanted to help with Honor the Earth in any way, or learn about your work more in any way, where would they go to find that out?
Well, IndigoGirls.com has a great activist section that links to all the groups that we work with, and it's just under activism, and it's just like a list by topic of everything, all the groups we love. Honor the Earth is in there, or you can go to honorearth.org, and all of our works about Honor the Earth is on that.
Fantastic. Any last thoughts, Amy?
I'm just excited. I've never been to this festival or the Frank Gathering or any of this, so I'm excited about it. I'm excited to be doing it, and I think it's going to be inspiring.
And we're super excited to have you as well.
Lay me down easy in the valley or the pines.
Thanks again to our guest, Amy Ray. We'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode of the Changeville podcast. Until then, check out our website or Facebook. The Changeville lineup is out now, and it includes Talib Kweli performing with a full band, Moon Hooch, David Bazan, Big Sam's Funky Nation, Big Frida, and, of course, Amy Ray. Tickets are going fast, so get yours now. Until next time, this is Brandon, signing out.